Arab authorities calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip while visiting Chinese soil. They're joined by Palestinian representatives. How will Israel respond? TikTok taking heat for viral content supporting the Hamas terrorist group. A group of lawmakers now reaching out to the app CEO to demand answers. Protesters at the APEC summit ambushed by a group of men. One victim landing in the hospital. Hear them recount the assault. And a spooky holiday with an even spookier aftermath. A number of trick-or-treaters at a Shanghai Halloween parade are now locked up, all for wearing costumes crafted to mock authorities. What do you think? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. With war raging on in the Middle East, ministers from some Arab countries are gathering in Beijing on Monday. They're calling for a ceasefire between Israel and terrorist organization Hamas. Israel remains focused on the hostages Hamas has taken.
The war must end immediately. We must immediately move to a ceasefire. Aid and food supplies must immediately be allowed to enter.
The ministers come from the Palestinian Authority, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, plus another Muslim-majority country from Asia, Indonesia. The leaders are on a tour to visit all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Their goal? To get the Council's member nations to shift their stance. As of now, some of them have shown support for Israel's description of its actions in Gaza as self-defense. The conflict began with Hamas's attack on Israel 7 weeks ago. About 1,200 Israelis were killed that day, and Hamas took around 200 hostages to the Gaza Strip. The U.S. and other Western countries denounced it as an act of terrorism. The attack led to Israel's bombardments of the Gaza Strip as the country seeks to free the hostages and eradicate Hamas terrorism. Zooming back out to world leaders, China's top diplomat said Monday that Beijing was a good friend and brother of Arab and Muslim countries. The Chinese regime has yet to criticize the initial Hamas attack. Given China's longtime backing for Palestine, the 5 Muslim countries chose Beijing as the first stop on their tour. Israel's ambassador to Beijing responded to the push for a ceasefire, saying now is not the time for a ceasefire, but for the immediate release of Israeli hostages captured by Hamas. The decision to host the meeting falls in line with Beijing's recent efforts to deepen alliances with countries outside the West. Experts say the goal is to counter the U.S. and establish a new global order with China at its head. TikTok is under fire from a group of House Republicans. They want to know how the platform amplifies content and just how much involvement the company's Chinese owner is. Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter is leading the charge, sending a joint letter to TikTok CEO Shou Chew. The lawmakers wrote that since the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack, disinformation related to the conflict has run rampant on the platform, stoking anti-Semitism, support, and sympathy for Hamas. The letter also criticizes the app's Chinese ownership. It accuses the Chinese Communist Party of co-opting the platform and demanding information on TikTok's algorithms. That's alongside longtime concerns about the app being used for surveillance and to collect American user data. TikTok said the Hamas content violates its policies and would be removed, and that the reports of it trending were inaccurate. The congressional letter comes days after videos backing 9/11 terrorist Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral on the platform. Nearly 70% of American states have banned TikTok from government devices. Now it's facing another ban in Asia, with critics saying it's causing social harm. At the same time, U.S. lawmakers are pushing to ban the controversial app nationwide. Watch.
I think our legislation will take on an issue like a TikTok, which is, I am afraid, could be used as a propaganda channel for the CCP, the Communist Party of China.
That's according to Senator Warner, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, in an interview with CBS News Sunday. He added that 40% of America's young people get all their news from TikTok. He introduced a bill called Restrict Act earlier this year. If it passes, it could allow the Commerce Department to ban the app nationwide. Zooming out, 16 countries worldwide have banned TikTok in some capacity. All of them have, at minimum, outlawed the app from governmental staff members' devices, citing data security concerns. Even the Taliban, which currently controls Afghanistan, banned TikTok inside the border. The Taliban says the decision is to protect young people from being misled. The terrorist organization shares close ties with Communist China. As for the latest country to block the app, China's neighbor Nepal announced this week that it will also ban TikTok. The video sharing platform is facing heavy criticism for propagating hate speech in the country.
3 men ambushed after protesting against the APEC summit in San Francisco. One of the victims says they had been walking back to their car when they saw the group waiting on the side of the road. NTD's Jason Blair brings us more.
3 men were walking back to their car on Friday. They had been protesting at the airport against Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping being in San Francisco for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC. They then noticed a group of men starting to follow them.
They were going to attack us very soon.
Coincidentally, Zhang and his 2 friends were heading to a police station to file reports of previous attacks outside of the APEC summit, but those were not as severe as this one.
So I just remember one guy just put me down from behind, and then my brain just went blank after that. I couldn't remember anything.
Zhang said the next thing he remembers, he was lying on the sidewalk.
Okay, sit down here.
They were already gone. And I heard a lady calling the police.
Of the 3, Zhang was the most seriously injured and was taken to a hospital.
It is very unfortunately, we American people, I think, know very little about how deep the infiltration of the CCP is already here.
I spoke with Jennifer Zeng about the attackers. She's a China expert and former member of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. She once worked for the Development Research Center of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. So, Jennifer, based on your opinion, do you think that these guys are more than just CCP supporters?
Yes, definitely so. From the way they carry themselves, the way they organize themselves, and even their haircut, some people recognize that's very similar with the CCP soldiers or police officers.
Zong said she's been getting reports that CCP soldiers have been entering the U.S. through the southern border.
What's the purpose? Could they, in some way, be activated once they got some call from the CCP?
In April, multiple CCP police stations were discovered in the U.S. The FBI arrested 2 people in connection to one in New York City.
This time, this kind of violence and organized violence has never been seen before. So I'm very much concerned they are not just your ordinary CCP supporters.
Zhang said he moved to the U.S. from China this year to escape the CCP's tyranny.
Chinese CCP to do this brutal thing in American soil? Why they allow these things happening here?
He also said during the protests, the police seemed to be biased and favor the pro-CCP supporters. Zhang said he's filed a police report, but says SFPD has not been very cooperative. So far, no arrests have been made. Reporting in San Francisco, Jason Blair, NTD News.
During last week's APEC summit, President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping agreed to meet again in the future.
They agreed that they would meet again, but there was no date put on the calendar.
The 2 leaders met in San Francisco and agreed to reestablish military-to-military communications between the U.S. and China. The front-runner for Taiwan's presidency has officially chosen a running mate, a high-profile diplomat well known in Washington but sanctioned by Beijing. Adding to the intrigue, the vice presidential candidate for Taiwan's 2024 election is also a descendant of a Mayflower passenger. Here's more.
Taipei's former envoy to the United States has been named the vice presidential candidate for the upcoming election on Monday. Xiao Meiqing is a high-profile diplomat well known in Washington, but who Beijing denounces as a separatist. She will be running alongside Lai Ching-te, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party's presidential candidate.
I believe we have lots of common convictions. We are both willing to take on responsibility for Taiwan, with a common belief that Taiwan's democracy and freedom can last forever. That is our deepest connection.
The DPP champions Taiwan's separate identity from China, while the largest opposition party, the Kuomintang, traditionally favors close ties with Beijing. Lai has led in most opinion polls ahead of the election, which is taking place as Taiwan comes under increased pressure from China to accept its sovereignty claim. Xiao has been Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the United States since 2020. She has extensive connections in Washington. The Foreign Ministry accepted her resignation as U.S. envoy earlier on Monday. The United States, as with most countries, has no formal ties with Taiwan, but it's the island's most important international supporter and arms supplier. Like Lai, Xiao is despised by China, which has twice placed sanctions on her. China's foreign ministry declined to answer a question about Xiao, saying it was not a diplomatic issue. China's Taiwan Affairs Office on Wednesday referred to Lai and Xiao as an independence double act. Lai dismissed China's comment.
China's thoughtless remarks on this election are sufficient to prove that China is intervening in this election, because none of the Chinese officials have gone through the baptism of democracy. So there is no reason for us to reply to these remarks.
Xiao was born in Japan to a Taiwanese father and American mother.
Xiao's American mother, Peggy Cooley, is descended from a Mayflower passenger. Xiao held American citizenship until 20 years ago, when she gave it up for her political career in Taiwan. Next, more top news from Asia and Oceania. Australia's Prime Minister is criticizing the Chinese regime over a, quote, dangerous, unsafe and unprofessional naval encounter. Last Tuesday in international waters, a Chinese destroyer used its sonar technology while Australian naval divers were underwater. The divers were trying to clear fishing nets that had tangled in the propellers of their ship. One Australian diver was injured because of the sonar. Staying in the South China Sea, the Philippine president says the situation in the region has become more dire.
The nearest reefs that the PLA have started to show interest in terms of slowly using these atolls, these shoals, as a basis for building. Basis really is what they are approaching, have come closer and closer to the Philippine coastline.
The nearest atoll is about 70 miles from the Philippines. The Chinese regime claims virtually the entire South China Sea as its own territory, despite an international tribunal ruling against it. Marcos Jr. made those remarks during a visit to Hawaii over the weekend, where he met with top U.S. military leaders. His trip comes amid a deepening U.S.-Philippine alliance. The Philippines this year agreed to give the U.S. access to 4 more military bases. The two also held their largest military exercises in decades back in April. That's as Washington looks to deter China's increasingly aggressive actions toward Taiwan and in the South China Sea. Back to Australia, its defense minister met his Indian counterpart in New Delhi on Monday. The meeting focuses on bolstering their strategic defense and security ties. India and Australia are also part of the Quad, an alliance that includes Japan and the United States. It aims to counter China's rising influence in Asia. Over in Japan, a major military exercise is in full swing. The nation's Marine Forces conducted a beach landing drill last week. It's part of efforts to gear up air, sea, and land forces to protect against potential conflicts with adversaries. One likely scenario is a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan. If Beijing took control of the island, Japan fears that the regime could eventually seize control of a vital trade route there. And ramp up pressure near the disputed Senkaku Islands. Japan claims these islands as its own. They're located a few dozen miles from Taiwan. A spooky holiday with a spookier aftermath. Weeks after a major Halloween parade in Shanghai, police have arrested multiple trick-or-treaters who attended the festivities. This follows video and photos online showing revelers dressed in costumes designed to mock authorities. From a surveillance camera to state health workers and Winnie the Pooh, young people took a light-hearted route to depict horrors in modern-day China. Those who took pictures on the scene are also under investigation. According to Radio Free Asia, the regime's cyberspace administration have reportedly stepped in, urging social media executives to ramp up censorship on contents that, quote, violate the core value of socialism. Official figures show that the agency has taken down thousands of so-called illegal websites and online accounts so far this year. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than 2 years. Last month, YouTube removed our demonetization status, but reimposed within days. If you'd like to support us, subscribe to our partner platform, APEC TV, where you can watch our full episodes, or consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A closer look at the key takeaways from the Bay Area's global summit last week. Was any progress made? And on the sidelines, a high-stakes meeting between Washington and Beijing. Could it be a sign of easing China-U.S. tensions? And how will the talks affect geopolitical strain on the world stage? We sat down with national security strategist and Republican presidential candidate Dr. David Stuckenberg for details.
I think it signaled American weakness in the way that they were invited in as almost a hero. China is not a hero. They're a belligerent. They're forming an axis.
Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.